So then moving on, the final point we have tonight is the movie that I recommended AJ, which is a 2015 independent movie called Tangerine, directed by Sean Baker and starring Katana Kiki Rodriguez and Mia Taylor, who I found out actually after I watched it, there was a campaign, and I don't remember the official terminology, but they were, I think, either the first or among the first transgender women to be considered for acting awards at the Oscars through this movie specifically. So unfortunately, they didn't get it, but the performances were amazing, and I love this
Amazing.
movie a lot. It's hilarious. It's it's very trashy in the best possible way. It's very in your
The
face.
best possible way.
I love it so much. So it's basically the gist of the movie is Cindy Rella is a trans woman who is also a prostitute who's just recently gotten out of jail. Meets up with her friend who accidentally lets her know that her boyfriend, who she was planning on meeting up with when she got out, has cheated on her. So they go on this whole long adventure throughout the entire day to find the boyfriend and call him out, and it weaves in and out all these different colorful characters, and I love it so much. So what did you think about this movie?
It was the second time I watched it. I watched it back in 2015 when it first came out. And then I kind of forgot I saw it. And then when you mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, I do know that movie. And I rewatched it and I fell in love with it again. Most of my friends are sex workers. That's the reality for queer people, especially trans women of color. I loved that it was their job. I loved that at no point, even when they were acting trashy, uh, they weren't acting trashy because they were sex workers. They were acting trashy because of the situations around them.
Right.
Um, you know, a trans woman or cis woman, hell has no fury like a woman scorned, and I really think that's what the movie is, about. Um, I loved even the sub characters like the woman who owns the donut time location. She's just handling it like this is every day for her. Like these people come in, they act a fool. She's like, "What are you doing? Get out of my store!" She threatens to call the cops, but she never does. I love her. I love the sub like even there's one character in the movie that's the cab driver that before you realize he's one of the sex worker's clients, you're like, why are we seeing random people go in and out of this cab?
Mm-hmm.
And I love the people that are in the cab. They're
Mm-hmm.
such great day players. So even besides the trans women of color that lead the movie that are so fantastic, they did a great job casting every character. Even Chester, the boyfriend that's cheating, he is so great. He is Jamie Kennedy in that stupid white rapper movie that was, well, I can't remember what it was called, but
I
he's
can't remember
essentially Jamie
either.
Kennedy. Yeah, it's some weird movie where he's a white guy wearing notoriously black people paraphernalia all
Yeah,
over
yeah,
him and how ridiculous it is. And Chester is that, and you're just like when you first see who he is and what he looks like, you're three-quarters into the movie and you're expecting this to be this like
yeah.
charismatic macho man, and he's just this idiot white boy in baggy pants with a hat backwards, and you're just like, all of that for this idiot, like for this moron. And then as he starts going, you kind of fall in love with him. He's so blissfully dumb and so idiotic that you're just like, man, I kind of like you. uh, and he's terrible, right? He's a terrible person, but he's so good, and funny, and really everything is so is so great and so funny, and it deals with a lot of things that trans women of color have to deal with. I think it doesn't go unnoted that every trans woman in that film, regardless if we were told that they were sex workers or not, were deemed to be sex workers. So I don't know if you know we're trying to get a thing passed. Essentially, it's the Walking While Trans Act. Essentially, women of color who are trans get stopped by police on an unreasonable, like most black people, an
Mm-hmm.
unprecedented amount of times. And we call it the Walking While Trans, where a police officer that's undercover will pretend to be looking for sex workers, and regardless of how the trans women respond, they're automatically thrown into the back of into the back of an undercover car.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I think there's a lot to be said with that. The fact that we automatically assume that every single trans black person in the film is a sex worker says a lot about the commentary that they're trying to make. And listen, they are pushing that narrative in the film. It's not because we're terrible people for
Mm-hmm.
assuming that. It's because they're pushing that narrative because it is a reality for most trans women of color. That is predominantly who makes up the sex worker trade, as far as within the LGBTQ plus community. The majority of black trans women that I know, sadly, are not sadly, sex workers work, but are
Mm-hmm.
forced into taking that kind of work. Um, I think it brings light to that. This movie brings light to that. I think it humanizes them. It is, again, most of my friends, if not now, have worked within the sex working field. You know, and I think that so for me, they're already humanized, right? But for the general public that looks at sex workers as these, shell of humans that are already dead inside is not a reality.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them have love lives, have friends, have community, whether or not it's family as in blood, but they have community, family. It's very important to push that narrative. So and not have to make these women into secretaries, and not pretending that sex workers don't have value.
Mm-hmm.
um it's the oldest profession ever. It is a profession that uh some people get into because they have to, and a profession that some people get into because they want to. And I have friends that are both. And I think that this movie helps with the humanization of sex workers. And listen, it's very hard to see how you know the Johns tend to treat the sex workers in this movie. Even the cab driver who you wind up feeling for, and you wind up having an emotional connection with. The first sex worker that he picks up doesn't have the body that he would like for that encounter, and he just pushes her kind of out of the car
Mm-hmm.
in a very shitty way. Regardless of the fact that he thought he was buying something else, it really does show. Even the good customer has a tendency to treat their sex worker as an object, and as a thing, as opposed to a person. So it doesn't shy completely away from that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
The one thing that I kind of like to go off of that point is, I think from the very beginning, I kind of get the vibe the first time I watched it. It definitely throws you head on into like, we are in this like trashy, dirty environment, and these are just two people who happen to live in that environment. And I think at first for me at least, I got the sense of like, I don't really like these two women. They're kind of loud and abrasive and kind of. I don't know if I like these are our main characters really, but one thing that I really liked is that like as the movie kind of goes on, like you said, it humanizes them a lot, and especially when we get to that final scene where they're like sharing that moment in the laundromat. It's very, it's very real, and like whether you've been in that situation or not, you definitely know, like, oh yeah, I have a friend like that, or like I have
yeah.
that relationship with somebody. But the kind of the people that we look at that we would almost identify with more, like that the cab driver, like you said, Chester, like in that sort of final montage, it kind of shows like, I don't know, like they're sort of like discontent with who they are and what they're doing, but what those two women are about doesn't change throughout that entire movie. They know who they are and they're proud of it, and I think that was very powerful and very moving. Something I really liked about it.
Yeah, and I enjoyed, without giving it away to our listeners, I enjoyed that it took a relatively dark turn. I think it would be a disservice to not show um, how trans women of color are treated. It would be, especially in that movie. Um, not that this is what happens in the movie, but I'll give another example of, something I like to remind straight people of. I don't know one gay person that hasn't been called a faggot from a moving car. Not one. I don't know one gay person or queer person who hasn't had a bottle thrown at them. I've had four, and I live in New York City. So I can't even imagine what it's like for people outside New York City within my community.
Mm-hmm.
I have been bashed and I'm a white person, and the time I was bashed, I looked like a woman completely. So it was just because I looked like a lesbian. Um, that's real, and it's a daily for us. It is a every freaking day. I mean, let's not even talk about the fact that we have to open up Facebook and have to read how this piece of shit president is trying to take away our rights.
Right.
Besides that, we are not able to exist in the world without being looked at, without being asked. I can't, as a person with a beard and D-cup breast, I cannot walk into a bodega or a convenience store without being looked at. Times that by 1,000 for Black trans women.
Mm-hmm.
And 1,000 is is probably not even a high enough amount. The average lifespan of a trans woman of color is only 38 years old because they get murdered so often. So things are pretty bleak. And it would be a disservice if this movie didn't show some of that, whether that be in how one of the cisgender prostitutes, cisgender sex workers are talking down to the trans women, whether it's that, whether it's the association of men who want to be with trans women who find trans, who fall in love with a woman, and it doesn't matter that they're trans, how they're instinct, automatically looked at as gay, and even though they're not, it's just a woman with different anatomy. How they're automatically looked at as gay is a big problem within both the cisgender and the both within the heterosexual and the gay community. So women of trans women living that experience have it coming from both sides. So I think this movie highlights that as well as being outrageously funny. You know, and you said you identify as heterosexual, correct?
Yes.
So it's funny, like, although, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that they were not loud women, but it's funny that you found them to be so loud, whereas I'm just like, girl, they were just being loud. It's okay. I'm like, in my community, it's like, oh no, we scream to get heard. Like, that's how we do. So for me, it was like, they were a little bit louder because it was like the start of the movie. And I was like, oh, I need like 10 minutes to warm up to this escalation.
Right.
But when women and trans women and queers get together, it's never low volume. So I doubt it annoyed me as much as it annoyed you, just because I was like, I know that girl. I've been drinking with that one. I've been drinking with her. So it's all kind of old hat to me.
Right. And that's not to say they definitely grew on me as it goes on, and I think that's kind of, it's just one of those instances where a lot of the comedy comes from like the loudness, like you said, like how passionate the Cindy is about, like, because it's a lot in that first conversation. It's kind of implied like this has been like an on again off again relationship, and her friend is just like, come on, please just get over him, like let me talk some sense into you. And how again, it's one of those instances I feel like where you almost have to you have to be in the mood to watch a specific kind of comedy. Like if you're going to sit down and watch a So Bad It's Good movie, you have to go into it with that mindset. And maybe I didn't have that mindset at the beginning, but
That's
by
right.
the time we're like 20 minutes in, I loved everything about those two characters. I loved the way they played off each other. I love how Cindy will like come into like a new encounter with someone she hasn't seen in a while, and she's all like the guy, I forget what his name was, but in like the back of the restaurant, and she's like all friendly with him, and then 2 minutes later she's screaming and like stealing his cigarettes, and it's her character especially was hilarious, but I also really loved Alexandra's sort of like her arc where it's like I just gotta put up with this to like I actually have all these other aspirations that are
Yeah.
kind of getting in the way of not like the aspiration, but my friend is getting in the way of my aspirations a little bit. But
Yeah.
I loved it. I love this movie a lot. And another technical thing that I found out that I didn't know, apparently the whole movie was shot on an iPhone 5S, which
Oh yeah.
that
You
blew
didn't.
my
Oh,
mind. Yeah.
that's why it. Listen, it's a great movie, right? But the reason it blew up
Hmm.
was because it was made on iPhone. Um, the amount of people that tell me like, "Oh, but Tangerine was shot on an iPhone," I'm like, "That's one movie. You don't get to use one movie as a reason why I should sell my camera and make movies on iPhone." Uh, but it was, I thought that was brilliant, right?
Hmm.
Like it was essentially them. I mean, listen, would I have loved maybe a flag or an extra light? Yes. There were times where I'm like, they're outside. I'm like, what I wouldn't do for a nice silk right
Yeah.
now to just use this sun a little bit. Um,
There's
you know,
definitely moments where you see all that orange, and I'm like, oh man, I feel like I'm in the LA heat right now.
100%. Which honestly is probably a filter on Final Cut right now or Avid
Yeah.
anyway, so it's probably worth it now.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's kind of why it even kind of blew up because everyone was writing about how iPhone, and then I'm sure it didn't hurt that iPhones, that Apple got wind of it,
Yeah,
and I'm sure that they helped with the promotion of that. Like,
yeah.
their phone was used to make a motion picture that's quite well done. So I'm sure they were pushing that as well. But
Hmm.
that's kind of where I got into you know, my realm of, I'm sure it would have made into my home anyway because it's a trans movie.
Hmm.
Uh, but the reason I heard of that at first was through Variety writing about it and doing an article about it being shot on my phone. I mean, listen, there's something to be said about, making your art, as a filmmaker. The one thing I can't distribute as a distribution company is things with bad sound.
Yeah.
I can get rid of, I can distribute a good movie with a VHS quality as long as the sound is good.
Hmm.
And this movie had great sound. There was no parts that I felt I couldn't hear, and there was no room tone in the background. I didn't hear wind on microphones when they were outside, and they spent a good amount of time outside in this film. Uh, it's LA, so it's not the dead, stagnant New York air where you can get
Hmm.
away with filming and not having wind interference. LA's windy, man. So like, the fact that sound was good, like they essentially saw the budget they had and said, we're gonna spend it on sound and we're gonna spend it on editing, and well done, ladies. Well done.
Yeah, and it definitely I think the fact that it is shot on a phone, it like almost makes you feel like you're watching like one of those like public freak out videos that get posted to Facebook, because the whole movie kind of is a series of public freakouts. I feel like the fact that it is on a phone almost makes like it lends itself to that sort of trashiness again in the best possible way. So whether
100%. They probably would have put a sepia tone on it and gotten, a similar, outcome. So
whether it
I
was
I
meant
I
for budgetary reasons or it was intentional, it did what it needed to do.
it worked. It works. Yeah. I mean, I wish people would stop asking me to make their movies and me saying like, okay, well, this is the equipment, and then offering their iPhone. I would like that to stop. I'm like, I didn't spend $40,000 on my camera and lenses so you can hand me an iPhone. But I'm happy it was made. I think they did an amazing job. Uh, you know, but let's not get used to. I'm nervous as a filmmaker that everyone's getting used to Zoom,
Hmm.
and that's the quality that people are going to come to expect. So I'm getting nervous for my grip department and my electrics and my director of photography. I'm
Well, they
like,
already have that the horror movie out that was supposedly made on Zoom, that Host movie.
yeah,
So we're gonna probably see like you said, we're probably gonna see a whole string of those over the next year.
yeah,
And if it's not
yeah,
that, when we finally get back to work, it'll be like the pandemic zombie apocalypse, and we're trapped in our apartments, and it's two people, and like it's like there's gonna be a
yeah.
whole lot of that.
I'm making a movie that's uh because I just need to make something before the end of 2020. I've distributed most of the year, and I'm like, I want to make something. So I have like a 5 minute short, and uh, it's only two people. It's in one room. I'm like, I could pre-light it myself. I could have, the AD do some basic grip work. I'm like, and there's a sex scene in it, and I'm like, okay, I just have to find a gay male couple that are both actors. And luckily in New York City, to find a gay male couple that are both actors is not a difficult find. So I'm able to. The only people that won't wear masks are the two actors who are living together and who are already being intimate. So I don't have to worry about them contracting COVID on my watch. And obviously, we'll be doing all the COVID compliance stuff. And I can't stress that to any filmmakers that are listening to this. Don't work on anything that doesn't have a COVID compliance officer. If they don't have the money for that, they don't have enough money to pay you your worth and to get COVID and wind up in a hospital. So please, if you're a filmmaker, do the right thing and hire a COVID compliance officer. This way, everyone stays 6 feet apart and everyone has a mask and everything's cleaned correctly. You know, it's important right now. If we ever want things to get back to normal, do things the right way.
Definitely, definitely. So all that is to say, Tangerine is a great movie. I think a lot of people should check it out. Again, just support this kind of movie being made, and it's the only way we're gonna normalize this type of content being readily available to everybody. You can, if you haven't seen Tangerine yet, you can watch it for free on Tubi, free on Hulu, free on Sling TV. It claims you can watch it for free with a Prime subscription, but I don't think that's true because I
It's
checked and it's
it's
not.
yeah, it's a Prime subscription through
Like one of those
a
other channels or something.
yeah. You have to have a subscription to the other channel in order to watch it for free on Prime.
Gotcha.
Like
And
a whole
then
whole thing.
yeah, you can rent it on Prime, I guess, and YouTube Movies, Google Play, Vudu, iTunes, all that. I'll put all the links in the description. But yeah, Tangerine, check it out. Great movie.
It's
Uh,
great.